Hello world, welcome. Another episode of 3 Candid Questions is out, and this was again a very inspiring and super energizing conversation for me. I interviewed Christina about the topic of being disconnected from your true self due to the belief systems that you might have been brought up in, due to the general community or society you live in. And it was super interesting to listen to how we can break free and how we can really be connected to ourselves. So jump right in, enjoy this really insightful conversation. Take as much away from it as you can. Like, comment, share your own thoughts. Love 3 Candid Questions, and we love you right back.
If we are live recording. Hi, Christina. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm well. So good to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, I'm so excited, and I really want to see where this conversation takes us today. All free flow and natural as usual. So before we jump right in, please tell our lovely audience who you are and what you do, what your focus is basically at the moment.
I love that question. It can be so shallow and so deep. Tell us who you are. My name is Christina Carlson. I am a self-relationship coach. I'm certified as a life and energy coach, but my work really focuses on being with our humanity individually so that we can be with each other collectively. So working on developing our relationship with ourselves, being able to be with our feelings, with our bodies, and operating in collaboration with who we are instead of at war with ourselves.
I love that. It is quite deep, although short. So let's talk about this whole thing that I heard you say, that it's all about connecting with yourself before we can connect with others. Jump right into it.
I'm like, yes, and I think it has to be both, and generally at the same time, because our wellness culture tends to be hyper individualistic and focus on just healing self-help, and becoming your highest self, and like leaving everyone behind. And I really think that our healing is individual and collective, but I think our relationship with ourselves is incredibly impactful because it's how we then see other people and how we relate to other people. Those two things are kind of are deeply impactful. Like how we relate to ourselves, how we've been taught to relate to ourselves, is sort of the way we operate in relation to all things. I don't know if you've heard that expression, like how you do something is how you do everything. Like I don't completely agree with that because I don't completely agree with anything, but there is a lot of truth in that. There's this space of like you'll have patterns. You have patterns that helps our brains save time, and you'll start to notice that the way you are interacting with yourself, or we're taught to interact with yourself, is how you then interact with other things and other people. Like bypassing the importance of certain things. You don't see them as important, for other people, really. The closer they get to you, the more you're like, shouldn't be a big deal because because you're not really taking the time for yourself. And it manifests different ways, but it's definitely impactful, changing how you relate to yourself. If you're learning to be in a relationship with yourself and accept who you are, really just be with all of your own hypocrisy and beauty, will change everything.
And I want to go back to this one point that you just made. I think it's so powerful to say, like, the self-care space these days is so focused on the individual and sort of often forgets how important it is to keep the community in mind, or this connection with others. So what would you recommend someone should do if they say, like, okay, on the one hand, it's about connecting with myself, but on the other hand, it's also the whole collective idea is so important. So what are some of your best practices to do both at the same time?
Yeah, I think do both at the same time. I think it is incredibly important if we're learning a new way of relating to ourselves, that we be doing that with some kind of support. So I won't necessarily say it has to be a therapist. It could be a friend who's on this journey with you. It could be a coach. It could be a book that you have that you're, oh, there's this new way of thinking. Have somewhere to bounce that off of. A community, a small, like an online group, whatever it is, a place where you can show up and practice this new way of being, and other people can witness you doing that. Because one of the core things in changing our identity, which part of how we relate to ourselves is a part of our identity, is your environment. So having an environment that you can go to reflect that new version of yourself to you is incredibly impactful and a necessary component in the process of that change. So it doesn't have to look a specific way. I have a friend online who I have been talking with since 2020, the beginning of the pandemic. We've been Marco Poloing since then. We haven't met in person, and we're very close. And that friendship has very specific and unique dynamics and things that we get to share in. But with them, I have developed and grown parts of myself because they allow space for that, right? It only takes one space for you to be able to start to see yourself in a different way. But try to find spaces and places where people are talking about themselves with this kind of compassion and with this kind of acceptance, because that will help you see how it's done and will create an easier pathway for you to make that possible for yourself.
Yeah. And I think for that, the natural first step, again, that's why you probably say it's so important connecting with yourself, is like first to identify to some degree, I mean, it's an ongoing journey, but to some degree, who am I really?
Ooh.
For us to start finding the spaces that are good for us also.
Yes. A lot of my clients are ex-religious, like I am. Others are just, dealing with patriarchy and capitalism and dissecting all of that. And a lot of them have the same issues. But one thing that happens when you deconstruct a worldview, whether it be patriarchy or religion, is it comes up the question, who am I? I did a workshop once called The Fuck Do I Want? Because it's such a question. It's like, but who am I? How do I know what I want? Like, if you spent your entire life being told what to want, what you should want, how to be a good girl, how to be like whatever, there's very specific parameters, and it can be really overwhelming to our nervous system to like make those decisions. So typically my recommendation is like, you don't have to try to figure it out. Like, try to get in touch with your sensations, like your actual physical sensations. Notice when you have to pee. Notice when you're thirsty, and try to do something about it. What do you feel right now? What do you need right now? Those like right now things, like now is all that exists. It's all that you really need. So what do you feel? What do you need? What do you want in this moment? And anchoring into that in every moment will help reveal eventually who you are. Yes. Because it's not like all of these external identities, like I'm a mystic or I'm a like life coach, all of those things change over time. They are identities, but they are not gravity. They are not everything. So I think it can be incredibly important to help us anchor into the very basics as a way of saying, like, this will always be who you are, is who you are in this moment, being with that. Everything else that comes from that is a beautiful benefit and expression of the other things.
Yeah, I love that idea, because I think once we learn to be in the moment, we can let go of also all the pressure, all the expectations, all the obligations that we often feel, consciously or subconsciously feel, and really learn to be with us. So
yeah, because it can feel like, I mean, whether you go through this in junior high and high school or like in your 30s, like me, it's like, it can feel like a lot that you're supposed to know. Like, you're supposed to know who you are. You're supposed to have it together. You're supposed to like have these answers for yourself. And honestly, not everyone even operates that way. Some people have a really, really solid sense of self and a very distinct, this is me. And other people just don't operate best that way. And they find more flow and ease in just, this is how I'm feeling today, you know?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you already touched for a second there on your whole story, on how you connected with yourself and the community you're coming from. So, share a little more about your journey, because I think that can also really inspire other people to start thinking about, okay, how connected am I actually? And am I in that community that is good for me? Or is there something that I want to change?
Yeah, I was raised evangelical Christian, which in the United States, which is like primarily white, and is deeply rooted in white supremacy. And if you know anything about that, it's a domination system. So it operates based on the concept that somebody has to win, white people, and anything below it has to be submissive to it. And that concept as a whole is deeply tied in with evangelical Christianity. So those two things are very linked. And within that system, everything sort of operates out of that same modality. There needs to be someone with a higher level of power who's less vulnerable than those underneath it. It operates based on control. So being raised in that, I was taught that, just like a lot of abusive situations, I was taught that I couldn't trust myself, that my own feelings weren't true, that my thoughts were dangerous, that that I didn't know for myself anything. So it was an initial taught in me a distrust for myself from the earliest stages of like, well, you can't trust your feelings. You can't trust your instincts. You know, if this person feels uncomfortable to you, like something's wrong with you because this is a good person. You know, there wasn't any trust in me as a child that I could know for myself something, and everything was external. So even though I didn't know it at the time, it was very obviously stated to me, like, your body is dangerous. That was like your body is sinful and evil and like the seat of Satan, or whatever it was phrased as. There's a lot of different ways to say it, but it's like, if you look at this through like outside of a religious lens and just through like a Western patriarchal lens, it really looks as those socialized as women, their bodies being responsible for anything that happens to them. So that's kind of like the narrative that kind of comes in that. It's like, your body is dangerous, as in like, it is not yours. It is used for other things and is meant to be used by other people. So there's no ownership. We're not even allowed to own ourselves. And that kind of deeply underlined a lot of my youth. I had a lot of anxiety because I was taught that like you could sin in your mind by having a thought. And so I developed OCD in my mind because I developed I think it's called, the actual technical term is like compulsive thoughts or something like that. Because I was afraid of that I would sin in my mind and that I would go to hell because I would not remember that I had sinned in my mind. It's like having anxiety about having anxiety. I literally developed anxiety from having anxiety. I was taught to confess my anxiety as sin, as a lack of trust in God. So there's a lot of like anxiousness overall, and like tie all of that to the fact that my body was something that was dangerous. I had a deep disconnection. I lived a lot, almost entirely in my head, separate from my body. And even that was severed because I would go into this space of fantasy. My earliest memories, I would imagine that I was characters in books. And because those characters had such simple lives, like they weren't in danger of going to hell. They were like, their story was secure. There was a beginning and an end. There was a narrative that they were safe to play within. So I would pretend to be those characters the majority of my time, just to feel like I could feel safe. And around puberty, like I got a lot of the messages that most of us socialized as women got, which was like that our bodies are like, not meant for us. There's something to be used by other people, and sexuality can be dangerous, and it's your responsibility what happens. And I kind of just like even more tightly locked up my movement. And I was already disconnected from my body in many ways, but then even more so, I disconnected from specifically like my hips and pelvis became very rigid. And I didn't notice until I think that I was 24. I took a hula class in Hawaii, and I started to move my hips, and I was like, and I'm sure you know this from your studies, but like a lot of emotions and experiences are stored in our body. And I felt during this practice a lot of that trauma releasing, because I was slowly moving my hips in this practice, and I became like addicted to it. I couldn't stop doing it. But I like to say that was kind of like my awakening for connecting to my body, because until that point, I couldn't feel myself. But in that experience, I was like, oh, I have sensations. And if I move really slowly, I can notice them. And it feels nice. Like I kept doing it. I would dance for hours. And no matter like where I was sleeping on a living room floor at the time. So when the house was empty, I would just be like hulaing around the house. In the tiny bathroom if people were home. Like just like everywhere I could, I was like, what is this? It was so profound to me. But awakening good feelings also meant awakening stuff that didn't feel good. And this was all just like happening naturally. And I started to feel really, really uncomfortable with the person that I was dating. And then I spent 3 more years with him until the physical sensations honestly got to be too much. And I was like, I feel like dying when I'm around you. This isn't going to work. That's it. Like I couldn't come up with a logical reason because my mind wouldn't let me go there. But I physically couldn't. I was like, something's just wrong. I blamed it on God, I think. Which was a good enough reason for him at the time. Yeah, and from there it just became more loud. My sensations just got louder, and I started to feel that same way anytime I was in a church or in a church community. Started to feel that disconnection, and I started to feel more things for more people. I realized my own bisexuality, and I was like, oh, this might be part of why I'm not comfortable in these spaces. Like I'm not safe here. And it just became like a relationship that developed with me over time. And it started so simply. And I really think that that's possible for everyone to just start so simply. Our bodies want to go back. Like we want to heal. It's not something you necessarily have to force. I don't love the like work. I think attention and intention are much more powerful when it comes to our own transformation, because our bodies have like a desire to repair and to heal. They want what's best for us. And I think that oftentimes that will happen when we allow ourselves the space and attention to do so.
I absolutely love that, because it moves away from the very, again, I feel patriarchal and capitalist idea that everything has to be hard work for it to be worth something. And, when we talk about intention and just attention and creating more awareness, and then it's sort of a natural flow that happens. I love to call it the free flow, where it just, moves without us really forcing anything. That's just such a beautiful idea, that it doesn't have to be too painful or too hard all the time for us to heal.
Yeah, I think There is always pain in healing, and there is often joy and celebration in healing. And I think the idea of it being hard, like, is a way that our ego placates itself, because we're so used to pushing and we're so used to fighting. It's the new way, like, to actually break the pattern is not to just throw all of that same energy into fix myself, but it's rather to be doing something different. And doing something different is the slowing down, is the attention, is getting into what you're talking about, which is that free flow. It's like, it feels so hard to us, even though it's not hard. It's just, we're so resistant to it because we've been, have you ever like run really, really long on a treadmill or something, and then you step off and your body's just like, I can't stop. That's what it's like. It's like, it's hard to stop. You're just so used to this motion. You really need to stop. You really need a break. Your adrenal glands, you're tired, you need food, but your feet are just like, we got to keep going. Like, it's this whole system is just like, you have to like gently be like, okay, we can slow the walk now, and we can like move back, because we're just like, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to rest.
Yes. And there's this other thing that I feel that came out in your story also, this whole cycle of judgment and guilt and shame. And I don't think it only happens in like extreme communities like the way you grew up, but I think it's a general component of many societies that there's always some self-judgment and shame and guilt mixed into how we sort of view ourselves. And I'm wondering, like, coming from such extremes in that way, how did you manage to break free from that? Get out of that cycle as well of the constant self-shaming and everything that's connected to that.
I want to say, like, I'll let you know when I'm 100% liberated.
I don't expect you to be like 100%, but
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. It's been my daily practice for like 3 years now, to try and be with what's in front of me and to try and be present. Not even try, but practice being present. And one of the most impactful things for me, and I use this a lot in my work with my clients, is the practice of self-compassion, as taught by Christina Neff. She wrote the book called Self-Compassion, and I came across it when I was first studying life coaching, and it changed my life, because it's the practice of being with ourselves when we feel big things. And I've brought in my own components that I use with my clients, of it being like, it can be your inner child that you're being with if it feels too much to be with just yourself. There's different ways to practice that depending on the client, depending on the person, is going to resonate with more. But the basic idea behind it is the practice of being in your body, in that sensation, with kindness, without jumping. And it's really hard because, or not hard, it's really challenging because we're used to jumping. It happens without us even noticing. So the first time you notice that, that's a celebration. It's like there's this arc, right? There's this cycle. And you're like, I quote unquote mess up. Then I feel shame. And then I'm like, I debase myself and tell myself I'm terrible. And then I'm like, no, but I can get back up again. And I try again. And then I mess up. And then I offer shame. And then I'm down here again, right? It's this thing. And the only way to break it, in my experience, is to halt it right after, somewhere after the mistake, or somewhere in the shame. Because wherever you're at, usually in the hardest parts, offering yourself, oh, I noticed. That's it. The next time you'll notice just a tiny bit sooner. And after 10,000 more times, you're going to notice it when it's happening. And it's like, oh, that's hard. And then maybe someday you notice it right before, and you're like, oh, have a different choice here.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the healing. It's like you've broken that cycle because all you did was notice and say, oh, that's hard. This has been really hard for me. Ouch.
Yeah, and it's true. I mean, the most impactful moments are often the very simple moments. And that's again not reflected in our idea that things have to be so hard work and so tense and so intense in that race that we were just describing earlier. So again, I love how you take us back to it has to be simple, and might not be always easy to go through the shame and then stop yourself, but it's a simple practice, and with practice you just get better at stopping yourself before you go down the whole, like round the whole cycle again.
It's kind of like that meme. I don't know if you've seen like the one where there's like someone on the highway and then they like take the exit ramp. It's like like sometimes it's hard to just like, take the exit ramp and just I'm not going to choose shame this time.
Yeah, true.
But we choose it often because feeling whatever we're feeling underneath it is harder.
Mm.
And offering yourself compassion when that happens. Because the thing is, like, I think we operate in a lot of self-help out of the idea that us changing then makes us worthy. But the process of breaking shame and moving away from shame, the very nature of it has to conclude that you will be in this process for a while. And even though you're in this process for a while, it doesn't make you any less worthy. In fact, you're worthy here, in it, in the shame, in every part of this cycle. And as you learn that, as you are in that, and you are saying every time you do that, I deserve to be here. I'm worthy. I'm a worthy, deserving human being. Even though I'm doing this, that's fine. It's okay. We're learning. It's okay. This was hard for me. It's
yes.
Okay. That is so healing because you are not saying once I get here, then I'm okay. Then I deserve better. Then I've arrived.
Yes, then I'm complete, because there's no completion. It's again, it ties into sometimes. But there isn't, right? We know that like the only constant in life is change. It's this famous quote, and it is so true, because nothing ever stops. If there's something that stops, it stops existing. And as long as we are here, we are constantly evolving and changing and expanding. And I think so breaking out of the shame cycle and just saying I'm worthy also means I accept that there's constant progress, and I'm sort of embracing it and not afraid of it anymore. I think a lot is also like scared of, this is work in progress, it's not complete. How do I deal with that idea?
Yeah, because yes. Oh, such a good point. Because you are going to change. And there is a part of you that knows that. Your ego loves the cycle because it's predictable. It's a problem you know how to solve. So your ego would love for you to just stay here. And anytime you resist that, you're going to feel a lot of ego resistance, because the ego's like knows that if you do make a different choice here, you will change. And that's scary for our ego because they don't know what's going to happen. They don't have a plan for the next problem yet. It's like it's a familiar thing. And so there's like an ego death when we do go to change that, because something in our whole existence does change.
So how did you deal with that? I can just imagine like coming from your background and then suddenly starting to feel and, filling all the blind spots that you had about yourself and how you've like your sensations, even just sometimes it must have been so overwhelming.
Yeah. I got pregnant in 2018, and I had been doing yoga and hula for a while before then. So that was kind of like this gradual into like feeling. But during my pregnancy, I entered like a different experience altogether of being able to notice my sensations in my body. And that was really positive. until I gave birth, which was extremely painful. And then like had a lot of like complications, and that was sort of the first time that I was like, oh, I'm going to choose to be in pain without resisting it.
Mm.
And it feels awful
Mm.
and a lot better than resisting it. But I didn't know that until I was like actually in it. Because our practice is resistance, right? Our normal way of doing things is like resisting the feelings. And I wouldn't by any means say that I've mastered this. It takes a lot of conscious intention. But I have started to notice that in the same way that I tend to resist my own feelings about things, I also had resisted my own sensations that were negative. So I would get like stomach pain, and then I would tighten my stomach, and it would get worse. And I was like, it was a couple of years ago. I was like, I'm just going to try like not resisting and see what happens. So I was just like, let myself be bloated and just like ease into it. And I was like, this is so much less painful. Not that it's not painful, but like it was just this like idea of like, oh, maybe if I take this concept, this pattern, and just be with it and see what happens in this realm, in this area. And it has been overwhelming at points, especially my own feelings around like leaving religion and my parents' response to that. And hasn't been great. It's gotten a little bit better, but the initial response was extremely negative. And I found that just in, since I'm noticing myself now, noticing that my instinct is just to cut it off, just to like, just to be like, I don't care, like, which isn't true. So it's taken like one way that I find into feeling that I found helpful for a lot of people who have had a difficult childhood is imagining that happening to someone that you love, or if you have a child, imagine that happening to your child and how you would feel about it, because how you would feel about it happening to them is how you did feel about it happening to you, because that's your experience still in your mind. And that can kind of give you an access, like a little gateway into like what you actually feel when your feelings feel inaccessible. Yeah. That probably didn't answer your question, but I said some things.
Yeah, no, I mean, you did say that it was quite overwhelming at times, but you also talked about how you sort of slowly found your way into your feelings and the sensations, and just using the practice of, I'm not going to resist this pain, for example, in my body. I'm just going to try and sit with it. That's number one. And number two, sometimes when it's such a tough situation that you absolutely resist, just think of it as someone else is experiencing that first, someone you care about, and then you can probably find your way into it. And I find that also very powerful, because sometimes the resistance can be so extreme, to a point where I've seen in many people, also in many of my clients, like, I'm afraid to lose control. If I go there, I'm going to go crazy, or, I'm so afraid of me not being able to handle my routine anymore because suddenly all this stuff is coming up. So,
yeah. Go ahead.
And I just want to ask about that fear, that extreme resistance that can come up. How, like, if we somehow know something is not right, but then we are still so scared to step into that space and explore.
Yeah. I think it depends on the individual. I got advice from my mom, actually, when I went through a really, really bad breakup. And this is compartmentalization. It's not like a healthy psychological thing necessarily, but I truly believe that our minds are brilliant and we do everything we can to survive. So I don't think I don't really see coping strategies as good or bad. I see them as coping strategies. So what she told me, she's like, I really like couldn't do anything. I was like, I had lost my identity in this person, and then I broke up with him because it was terrible. I lost like who I thought I was. I was like on the floor. And my mom was like, try giving yourself 2 hours every day to just cry. And then she's like, and then compartmentalize the rest of your day if you have to, knowing that you will come back to these 2 hours that you can be in that experience. And I've heard a similar advice given when, have you heard of Varvara Aroshina? She does, yeah, in her work, one of her classes, Feelings 101, I think it was, she talks about about the fear you're describing. It's like, what if my inner child just doesn't stop crying? Like, what if my internal self has so many feelings and I don't have time? Like, I don't have time to just be with all of these feelings. And I believe her answer was something along the lines of like, if you have an extremely needy child, you set aside time to specifically be with them and still honor your boundaries to like do life, right? You set aside 3 hours a day. I'm just going to be with this person. If they need to cry the entire time, that's fine. You do what you can. Take that time and be with them. And every day, you coming back to this work and allowing yourself to just be in whatever the drama this is that's coming up for you, then you will know, your body will know, she's coming back for me. They're coming back for me. So you develop a safe relationship that's not a constant, codependent, overwhelming, this is everything. That being said, if that happens, there's nothing wrong with you. If it does completely overwhelm you, there's a good fucking reason for that. And that's fair.
And then sometimes the journey just takes the time it takes, to get from that place to the next place, so to speak.
Yeah. I think naming something and actually allowing it, more often than not, tends to be less scary than we think it is and takes less energy than resisting it does. But that's really hard to convince our ego of.
Yes. I mean, I can think of several situations where I finally spoke, as you say, name it, say it's something like, this is what I'm experiencing, or this is what it actually is. And once we do it, it's such a relief, no matter how messy it is. But to get to that point, as you say, the ego shows up and tells us, no, that's outside the comfort zone. Don't go there.
We don't know what's out there.
Absolutely.
There's a chart on, I forget who made this chart. It's really brilliant. It's like a diagram, right? And it's like, basically like we're down here and then here's like this resistance level. Our goals are always up here. So it's always just, and then we go back, because it's like the ego is on that line just going, what do you think you're doing? That's why it's hard.
Yes, and it's so funny, right? That if we really are true to our selves and what we want to achieve, or our goals, whatever, our dreams, our burning desires, there are so many terms for that. They are really always like way past the resistance.
Yes.
But then to really step out of that, that's a very different story. That's why I think many dreams just remain dreams and don't turn into that reality that we are living.
Yeah, because it takes a lot of, when you're in that cycle, it takes a lot of, attention to do something different, because otherwise we'll live the pattern and we won't even notice it. Have you seen Everything Everywhere All at Once?
No.
Okay. It's an A24 movie that won a bunch of awards this past year. But it's about like multiple universes. And in it, the main character, she's in her life where she didn't do anything. Like they're like, you're perfect because you have so much untapped potential. You've tried all of these things and been a complete failure. This is like the perfect life. for like whatever the thing is. But I thought it was so funny because it was like, in this universe, she's the one who didn't actually do all of the things. In all of her other lives, all of the other universes, she's taken one of those things and done it. And I just think it's so interesting to think about, because like we have so many choices and so many spaces of option in our life where it's like, you could choose to do this. Yeah. And we do or we don't. And none of them are wrong. Like, we don't have to do anything. At one point, he says to her, you can either come with me and live up to your ultimate potential, or you can lie here and live with the consequences. And she literally says, I'll lie here. Thanks. And I'm like, I relate.
Yes. But isn't that also part of this whole concept of you have to be this, biggest version of yourself, but it coming from a place of this will be hard work?
Yeah.
And
it's like, is it really?
Does it really have to be that?
No, or was it just one small choice along the way that was like that direction? Like we don't know that. And it's also like, no version is better than another. Like the life that she was in, the one she didn't live up to any of the potential, it's like, still a worthy human, still deserves love and kindness and belonging. It's like that the choices around that, the like making something of your life, the thing that we like long for a lot of the time, is not what's going to give us that worth. That worth is just there.
Yes. And again, that goes back to connecting with yourself so that you can feel that worth is actually there already.
Yeah. And there's so much ego resistance because we want to believe the story we've been told, that if we do live up to our ultimate potential, that is when we deserve that worthiness. But you need to have the belief and relationship in yourself and your own worthiness to even get to something like that, if that's what you want. So it's very paradoxical, like most things.
Yes, like most things. And on the other hand, it's very simple, because I remember there's that saying in the spiritual world, like be, do, have, like you first, you have to be first yourself, your truest essence, whatever you want to call it, or just, however you want to be today. Doesn't have to be complicated. And then you just, you start doing the stuff that is actually aligned with that. And then you can have whatever it is, but it's not like you suddenly have, and then you can feel happy about yourself or what you're worth and all that. It's actually the other way around.
Yeah, that's when you look at like physics and the laws of the universe, that's true. Be was the first law, because otherwise it would be to not be. So be and then do, right?
Yes.
Because be, then you have the being, and it's like, now we do the doing because we are being. You can't do that the opposite way.
Yeah, and then something will actually naturally come from that, which is the have. Yeah. Now we are sort of in physics and philosophy. Where else do we want to go with this conversation? Come on.
Anywhere.
Yeah, but I'm still thinking about this whole story of, being in a place and probably also around people who are not necessarily supporting you to connect with yourself, like in your case. So, I mean, you spoke about the hula hooping and just moving your hips, and that was sort of one connecting point. But how did you start to attract people into your life that were actually sort of supporting, you being happier, connecting with yourself, and living more the life that felt right for you? Let me put it that way.
Yeah, that's a huge question, because like a big part of like what everyone is asking and been asking, especially since 2020, is how do I find community? How do I make friends that are actually going to support me in this way of existing? And I think there's multiple ways of doing that, but one of the biggest ones is like, you have to show up. Like, you have to just like fly your flag of whatever, right? Like there's the thing among a lot of queers, if you see a little rainbow, it's like, just, I'm gay. Like, without saying a whole lot. You're just like,
Yes.
here I am. It's just a way of kind of signaling to other people, like, I might be your person, at the risk that you're not going to be someone else's person. So there is that vulnerability of like, are you ready to like find your people? Because you're going to lose people that don't fit that. And it doesn't feel worth it at first because it feels too risky. But as you do it, it does become worth it because you start to feel how amazing it feels for people to actually see you. And that like initial, I'm trying to think of an example, like when you're a kid and you go to a birthday party and you're hesitant because you don't know these kids, like 10 minutes in, you're just like, this is the best day ever, right? Because you're like running around and just balloons and shit. It's like, yay. Yeah. But you didn't know that, and you had to get over a lot of fear to get out of the corner of the room and to get the cake, right? There's like that initial thing you're moving over to get there. And I think that's true for this as well. If we have lived our entire life in one specific community, finding like shifting that can be challenging. I have a friend who's a health coach, and she has a very similar philosophy when it comes to food. But I would say this of people as well. It's really important to fill your life with good rather than just to get rid of everything that you have. So like with, extreme dieting, fuck diet culture, PS, is like, you throw everything out and you just like put the only healthy, only whatever that means, only like, the stuff that's quote unquote approved in your house so that you're not quote unquote tempted. It's very rigid and triggering for our egos. Our egos love it because it's just like, we know how to solve the shame cycle problem. We'll live here forever. But like a much more gentle nervous system approach is like, how about just keep some carrots in a salad? Something that sounds good to you. Like if the only vegetable you like is sweet potatoes, like get some sweet potatoes and like have that twice a week, right? Just like allow your palate to adjust to something you actually enjoy. Start eating meals that are healthy that you like. Don't get rid of your ice cream. Don't get rid of, like, unless your doctor, you have to. Which I ate ice cream for a month once, and my doctor's like, you're lactose intolerant. I was like, fuck. I was trying to intuitively eat, and I went extreme. But like filling your life with like instead of just like pushing everyone out of your life, find a few spaces where you start to notice you feel seen. Because what happens with the food and with the people, you'll start to feel the difference intuitively. You'll start to gravitate towards like, wow, that feels really good. This person actually sees me. I like how I feel after I hang out with them. I want more of that. You naturally will lean into that. I really love how I feel when I eat like this. It's good. I love this meal, whatever it is. You lean in, right? That is a natural process. That is our bodies wanting to do the same thing is true with people. And like in my own experience, I moved to a different city right before I like sort of left that community. I joined a few when I first got here, but the people I moved to this city with were also like sort of on their way out. So we sort of had a little bit of that space and then just began to build outside of that. Which is another cool thing. If you are starting to leave a space that feels somewhat not good for you, chances are there's a lot of other people out there that are leaving spaces that are not good for them. Finding Facebook groups for people deconstructing, that's kind of, a more general like religious sense, but there's other spaces where people are trying to do this work. You're not the only one. There's other people that are in the same space as you. Being open to the fact that you're not alone in this is really, really helpful.
Yes. And I think once we just, put our toe out there, we start realizing, where I felt I was alone with all this, there are so many. literally millions of people across the globe are on a journey to discover themselves and to find their place. And, it's so amazing to think like that it's a collective thing, although we often feel we are very alone with it.
Ooh, yeah. My ego always wants me to think I'm special, and I'm the only one that feels like this. And I have these special, amazing problems that no one understands. I'm unique. And it's like, no, you're fucking normal.
Yeah. I mean, there's still truth in how you are is like perfect, and, the way you are is just the way you should be. But yes, I mean, that's true for everyone else as well.
I know, it's it's the sneaky little ego.
Yes.
You are chosen. You are special to carry this burden of whatever. Oh, you gotta love it.
Yeah, I mean, it's so nice when we can catch it. And again, we are onto a really great different point here, that it shouldn't always be that serious. Like, it
Funny.
should be fun. Yeah, it should be. Although sometimes, of course, if we think about all the traumatic and painful stories that we or other people go through, it can be quite like, whoa. But at the same time, it's like, when you look back, you can laugh about it and say, like, that's the beauty of it.
Yeah, like everything means everything and everything means nothing at the exact same time. Like you have, like, you should be taken very seriously, and you don't need to take yourself seriously. Like both can be true, like meaningful and meaningless at the same time. Because the meaning that we make in this life, the meaning we get to make of things is meaningful. Like if it means something to us, it's meaningful because it means something to us. But if it doesn't, it doesn't. And that's also fine. Like you have a lot more say in the value and meaning of things in your own life than we've allowed ourselves to believe. And there's so much levity in looking at like the absurdity of like the entire dichotomous way things exist, because it's like we're all just running in these circles. Like, isn't that interesting? Like, look at us. We're so funny and cute.
Yeah, you can put it that way. Cute.
We're cute. We're trying to do things. We're adorable. And it's like so precious to watch us. Like, we all care so much. Comes out in backwards ways sometimes, but everybody really, really wants good things ultimately. We just don't know how to get there a lot of the time. And we've been hurt a lot of the time. And we don't have capacity a lot of the time. But like underneath there, I really think that every single person wants good. It just doesn't always come out the best way.
Yes. And I feel that was just a perfect wrap up to this deep dive conversation. Thank you so much for this lovely time and all the insights that you have shared.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been great.
So what did you take away from my conversation with Christina? I took so much away from it when I interviewed her, especially the realization that nothing just happens overnight, that it's small moments, small steps that really take us closer to who we truly are. And just think about it. The more we can be our authentic self, the more the world, the universe, however you want to call it, the people around us know who we are and what is important to us and what actually also our dreams, our aspirations, and our skills are, and then the right opportunities and the right people can find us. So think about that for a little. Just reflect, how am I walking through this world at the moment? Am I myself? Or can I even be more myself, show more of myself, and with that, make my life even more beautiful, more aligned, and more exciting? See you soon for another inspiring conversation on 3 Candid Questions.